lot. It seems to happen almost every couple of years, it seems like. But Drew, do you think that the away team gets more of an advantage if they move to a neutral location?
Maybe just a slight one, but another thing I brought up was like the Titans are also away this weekend. They're not at home, so if they wanted an even more like playing field, they could move to the Titans Stadium, because that way, like you were saying, if they go to Minneapolis, Kansas fans just have to drive. Florida people have to fly.
Right.
Assuming they're not already out of Florida at this point.
Mm-hmm.
And vice versa with New England. Both would have to fly, but it's a little farther. No one's really going to go, at least with the Tennessee game. But you can either fly or drive, because it's not that long of a drive from either place. So realistically, I mean, if you move to Tennessee as well, provides a better turnout in my mind.
And who's to say that's really like the focus right now? Who's to say that's really the focus of, Floridians that are, in a situation where they might be hit with a natural disaster? Maybe that's not particularly the focus right now.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, obviously, if you got a hurricane coming to your house, you're probably going to have your mind on bigger things, bigger fish to fry than.
Assuming you're staying in Florida, if you're out of Florida, and you're not too worried at that point. You're like, I hope my house doesn't fall.
I think you're still worried about your house and everything. Yeah, you're still worried about your. I mean, anytime there's a natural disaster, if you weren't home but a tornado was in your home neighborhood, you would obviously still be a little concerned.
I would be on the road home freaking out.
Exactly. So, but yeah, you're absolutely right, Cyril. I mean, I don't know if that's necessarily what the fans are, concerned about. I don't really think the Buccaneers are that concerned either. I mean, we played a 2020 season where there were no fans in any stadium, so home field advantage really wasn't a thing to begin with.
Right.
And now with 17 games, some teams do get an extra home game, so it's not as big of an issue as it maybe used to be, but it is something to think about. But we talked about Minneapolis, and one thing before we kind of move on from the conversation here, I was going to ask you guys, what do you think about the prospect of playing in New England? Obviously, it's a long way away from Florida. It's all the way up the East Coast there. But would that offer maybe some more home field advantage for the Buccaneers? You talk about Tom Brady coming home and how well respected he was and how well praised he was even when he was facing the Patriots. And Patriot fans, especially since Patrick Mahomes came in, really don't like the Chiefs too much. So we'll start with you, Brian. Do you think that would provide maybe more of a neutral setting compared to like a Tennessee or somewhere where Chiefs fans are more accessible?
Yeah. Well, I think it should kind of stay more of a home advantage for the Buccaneers. I didn't see where the Falcons home this week, because I was thinking maybe they could go there, Atlanta.
I believe they are home. They're playing the Browns.
So that makes sense. Yeah, I think it would be good if they could make it like Tennessee or New England. I think that'd be better than Minnesota.
Yeah, and I mean, Minnesota is a great stadium. Don't get me wrong, but obviously compared to the distance to Tampa Bay and the distance from Kansas City to Minnesota, obviously a lot more favorable for Kansas City, like we talked about. But what do you think about the New England prospect, Drew?
I think regardless, it could be a good turnout. I mean, it would obviously benefit Brady a little more than Brady and the Buccaneers more than it would Mahomes and the Chiefs. But I think no matter where you go, that's going to happen. You go to Minneapolis, you're going to have more of a Chiefs turnout. You go to New England, you're going to have more of a Buccaneer/Brady turnout.
Right.
So I think regardless of where you go, there's going to be some advantage given towards one team or the other. But I think it's going to make for a good game regardless.
Absolutely. Rematch of Super Bowl 54, right? Cyril, we'll come to you. Do you think New England would be a good spot for if they had to change the location of the game?
I think from of course, from the standpoint of Tom Brady being one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time, and having the majority of his career, of course, now in New England, I think it will be awesome from a historic standpoint. But beyond that, I mean, if it fits its chips, if it works out for them, and if it makes sense for the league and the leagues, like I said, from a proximity standpoint, and everybody not having to travel too much, especially in a time like this where no one knows what really could happen. So I think, I think if it works, then it works. But if it should just basically depend on whatever makes the most sense logistical-wise for me. But, of course, who wouldn't want to see Tom Brady return to, Foxborough?
Yeah, I think that would be such a sweet thing to see, where the fans are actually, rooting for him and rooting for his team compared to where he obviously returned to New England and was facing them the only time he has been there that was the first year I think he was in Tampa Bay. But yeah, so obviously a lot to think about with the hurricane season. Still a lot of games up in the air. I know they talked about the Braves game and the MLB being up in the air. So really just going to have to be a kind of keep an eye on and see, play it by ear. But anyways, we'll move on now, and we'll move on to our weekly segment here on Wednesdays, second week, and we'll be doing week 3 overreactions to NFL games. So I've written down a few week 3 overreactions here that I've been seeing, or not necessarily overreactions, just kind of reactions I've been seeing to week 3 in the NFL. And we'll just go down the line and kind of see what everybody's thinking, if this is an overreaction or if this is actually something that's plausible. So we will start with Cyril, and the question I'm going to ask you is, or the statement I'll give to you, the Raiders season is over. Do you believe that's an overreaction or no?
I believe it's an overreaction only because there's so many opportunities for things to go bad for a lot of AFC teams, as we saw this last week. A lot of AFC teams lost to teams that they shouldn't have lost to, and in some cases very badly, 38-10. So there's been a lot of upsets so far, and many things can happen. I think it's really unfortunate that the Raiders are 0-3. I think the Raiders have more talent to be better than 0-3, and they know that as well. So it's more about if it's going to represent throughout the year. And they were a streaky team last year as well. So I think that they'll be fine in terms of possibly making a wild card, but they definitely should have some red alerts.
Drew, what are you thinking?
Overreaction. They have a lot of good names on that team. Kind of like Cyril was saying, they just got to find a way to turn it around. They're a streaky team. They can go on losing streaks and then turn it right back around and go on a win streak. They just got to get in that momentum early, because I feel like if they lose another 2 or 3 games, that's when it's not going to be an overreaction. It's going to be a reality for this team especially, and that's going to be hard. Because you know Aaron Rodgers is over in Green Bay just laughing at Devontae like, look at me. Look at what you left. You did this to yourself.
Right, exactly what I'm thinking. Everybody was talking about week 1, how Devontae Adams was showing up the Packers receiving core, and now the past couple weeks, it's actually been the other way around. But
Definitely.
Brian, what are you thinking? You think this is overreaction?
Well, I think it could be a little bit of an overreaction. Obviously, though, starting 0-3 is not ideal, especially in the division they play in the AFC West. You got the Chargers and Chiefs, and it's going to be tough for them. I do think they've been banged up, though, pretty well, too. Like, I know Hunter Renfrow didn't play last game, and I just think if Renfrow comes back and just give Devontae Adams the ball, honestly, and use their weapons. I know Derek Carr can play better than what he has been, but my only question about them is just Josh McDaniels as a coach. I don't really like him as a head coach, and I'm actually surprised they hired him in the offseason as their coach.
Yeah, I'm going to kind of agree with your Josh Daniels take there. I really thought that was kind of a head scratcher. I really think he didn't fit the system all too well. I think he's a great coach. I think he's a great offensive coordinator. But as a head coach, they've tried it before and it hasn't worked out. And yeah, I wasn't too sold. But I'm actually going to go. I'm actually going to disagree with all of you, and I'm going to say that this is reality. I think the Raiders season, when you start 0-3 in the NFL, you got to realize how much of a hole you've dug yourself in here, because I know they had a stat after week 2 talking about if you go 0-2, how last year I think it was like 7 teams went 0-2 and none of them made the playoffs. And if it's 0-3, it's even less of a chance. The Raiders in an AFC conference that is just so competitive, and especially their division, which the Broncos offense is looking terrible, but they're still winning games nonetheless. So when you have teams doing that, and you're going 0-3 against teams that you probably should be winning against most of the time. I mean, that Cardinals game, they should not have lost that game. Week 2, they were up 20-0, and they ended up losing that one in overtime. I know that they're banged up right now. I know that Hunter Renfrow is hurt, but I'm really just not sold on the duo of Josh Daniel and Derek Carr. I think Josh McDaniels is just kind of a so-so coach. I think Derek Carr is just kind of a so-so player. I think the Raiders will turn it around a little bit. I don't think that they're going to be like the worst team in the NFL by any means. But as far as your season goes, obviously your goal every year, your first goal is to make the playoffs. If you're starting 0-3, it's really not looking good. But we'll move on to our next take here, and that is Jalen Hurts is the MVP frontrunner. Is that an overreaction, Brian?
I don't think it's a overreaction. I'm a Eagles fan, but I don't think it's an overreaction. I think he's the real deal. You know, he worked hard all the offseason. You know, they built a great team around him. He's got weapons. He's got a defense playing for him. His accuracy's improved. His deep ball was really the question, and I think he's done well with A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith throwing it deep so far.
Drew?
I think this is a reality, but I'm also kind of biased. I may or may not have him on my fantasy team alongside Kyler Murray. But as Brian was saying, he's a powerhouse player. He's dominating. The deep balls was a big question, but he's clearly proven that he's here to play the game and he's here to earn that MVP title. And I think as of right now, he is the front runner.
Is that real?
I came in here last week and I said what I said about what he did to my Minnesota Vikings, and I said that he was going to have another big week against the Commanders.
You were praising him
And
hard.
I was. I'm glad you guys remember it because I came here and I said and I'm going to stand on what I said last week, and I'm going to say it again that I think he's going to be the Lamar Jackson of the NFC for years to come. I think that he's depending on the weapons that he has, and now that he has actual weapons, he has a good O-line, he has a good defense, playmakers on defense, to create turnovers. I think that he's going to have a lot of chances to put points up on the board, a lot of chances to put up big yards, and I think he's going to be an MVP candidate to the end. I really do.
Yeah, I agree with you guys 100% on Jalen Hurts. I am huge on Jalen Hurts this year. And an interesting point you made that he is like the Lamar Jackson of the NFC, which is interesting because we heard so much stuff about Lamar Jackson, even after he won his MVP, about how he wasn't going to keep it up, how he's a running back more than a quarterback, how this style of quarterbacking is just not going to work. And now we're seeing it start to pop up even more. I would say Jalen Hurts is a little better thrower of the football personally. That would be my take. I think they're kind of even between the two, but I go Jalen Hurts, 1A, 1B between him and Lamar for throwing the football. But their running just sets them apart, I think, from so much of the other competition. The only reason I'm going to say this is an overreaction is because I think Lamar Jackson, the other guy we're just talking about, is actually the MVP frontrunner right now. I think it's Lamar Jackson 1 and Jalen Hurts 2. As far as the MVP standings goes, because Lamar Jackson has just been crazy. I think he has kind of willed his team to a couple wins.
Right.
That win against the Patriots, that was a close game.
That was close.
But Lamar Jackson now, and maybe I'm also a little biased because I have him on my fantasy team, but when you're scoring 45 points in fantasy 2 weeks in a row, 3 weeks into the season, that is definitely grounds to be the MVP.
I think you kind of brought it up. I know you both kind of brought it up a little bit. We're seeing this common trend now where Lamar Jackson kind of stood out. He did this thing, and everyone's like, that's kind of weird. And now we're seeing it pop up more and more. I feel like that's something we see a lot of in sports anyway. We see one player kind of stand out. They do something interesting that not a lot of other players do. And then over time, we just see more and more players getting involved in whatever it is.
Yeah, and you have to think about how for the longest time, pocket passing was the biggest thing. But now then we started to get more into mobile quarterbacks. We saw, like Aaron Rodgers pop up, and we saw some, different guys, Cam Newton. There's guys who like to run the football a lot, but now we're seeing even better mobile quarterbacks that can almost act as running backs. To think of that, like a quarterback like Lamar Jackson could almost regularly get 100 yards on the ground any given week. A couple years ago, or I guess not a couple years ago, like 5 years ago, that would have been kind of insane to think about. But now, Jalen Hurts, Lamar Jackson, any of those guys, even Josh Allen, I'd say if they give him enough attempts, if they give him enough opportunities, they can 100% get to like 100 yards rushing on the ground.
And they also have one of the best arms in the league. It's one of those things that it's not, you can really just like back off and just hope that, that he's going to run it up the gut every time. No, they have some of the best arms in the league. They have some of the fastest and best wide receivers in the league and weapons in the league, possession catchers. Everything has been put in place for these guys to really succeed. When you look at the Kyler Murrays, the Lamar Jacksons, and the Jalen Hurtses of the world that are these mobile quarterbacks that can get you 100, you can't bank on them getting 100 and clog the line, because they're going to go over the top with Hopkins when he's healthy. They're going to go over the top with with guys like it used to be Marquise Brown for Lamar Jackson, but now even a guy like Jalen Hurts has AJ Brown, Devontae Smith on the same team, 2 number ones. So it's scary out there for defenses for sure.
Yeah, and I mean, especially the week that Devontae Smith had, that was just insane, going off for like 154 yards in the first half. And I think he also had a couple touchdowns. It's just nuts. Wasn't great playing against him in fantasy either. But, yeah, I mean, it's really an interesting discussion. I think we only kind of scratched the surface on it, but that'll be a topic for another day, I'm sure. We'll continue on with our overreactions here. And we'll start with you, Drew. Are the Jaguars for real? Or here's the statement. The Jaguars are for real. They're the favorites to win the AFC South.
I feel like that's a reality. I know they've struggled a lot the past couple years with Urban Meyer, but I saw a stat over the weekend. It's like their current coach, I can't think of his name right now. It's blanking my head. He's won.
Doug Peterson.
Yeah. He's won more games this season alone than Urban Meyer won. Most of the time he was coaching. That just baffles me. So I think right now they're definitely up there. I think this year they're proving themselves. They're like, yeah, we're done messing around. We're here for business and business only.
Brian, you think that's an overreaction there?
No, I really like the Jaguars this season, actually. I'm a big fan of Doug Peterson. He used to be a quarterback himself, so I think he can help out Trevor Lawrence a lot this season. You got ETN and James Robinson in the backfield is a great combo to have. Christian Kirk and Zay Jones have been playing out of their minds lately. And I think I see them as like the Bengals from last year. Is they had a poor season to start, but you got them all some experience the first season, and now they're ready to go in year 2.
Yeah, I think you both brought up some great points there. Cyril, would you like to, do you think that's an overreaction, or are you going to agree with them, do you think?
I'm going to say that it is not an overreaction that the Jaguars will win the AFC South, because every year we have a division that is like somebody has to win. Usually it's the NFC East, but this year I don't think it's going to be the NFC East, because the Cowboys look decent. The New York Giants look decent, and of course the Jalen Hurts-led Eagles look really good. So usually it's the NFC East, but I think this year it will be the AFC South, and I think that the Colts, I think are going to be, average in my opinion. The Texans are going to be, not so good, and the Jaguars are just going to end up coming out on top, depending on how things go out with them and the rest of the like the Titans and so on and so forth, who haven't looked good, who got thumped by the Buffalo Bills badly. So I think it's going to be one of those divisions that somebody has to win, and I think why not the Jaguars? They're a young team, they don't know any better, if you will. So I think that they're going to be the team that comes out.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with you guys. I'm going to say this is not an overreaction. I think it's going to be between them and the Colts, and I will stand by the statement I said last week, where I think that the winner of the AFC South is going to be very bad. I think that they're going to be like an 8-9 or like a 9-8 team, one of those teams that either barely has a winning record or doesn't have a winning record, and it's just doesn't belong in the playoffs but had to win because of the division. But I mean, yeah, you take a look at the Jaguars schedule, and they barely lost to the Commanders, a game that they probably should have won there, but then they blanked the Colts. They beat the Chargers, who were a little banged up. You get a tough game now this weekend against the Eagles, but after that, you kind of got smooth sailing, a home game against the Jaguars. They go face the Colts again, but they get the Giants, who just kind of lost, who I thought were kind of frauds at 2-0. I mean, the Broncos, the Raiders. You get a couple tough games in there with the Chiefs, the Ravens, and stuff like that. But overall, pretty easy schedule. And you got a guy who I think has a lot of potential, who I wasn't really so sure about, especially even at the start of this year, which is Trevor Lawrence leading the team. But he is definitely more than capable of kind of blossoming into that role that I think Joe Burrow did last season. Definitely. And, I think the Jaguars right now are sitting real pretty. Granted, we're only 3 weeks in, but they've looked pretty good so far. All right, and we'll start with you, Cyril. For this one, the Bills are no longer Super Bowl favorites because they can't win close games. Just a little nugget here. In the last 7 one-score games for the Bills, that dates back to the start of last season, they are 0-7 in those games. They cannot win one-score games. But do you think that's a knock for them, or do you think that's an overreaction?
First of all, great nugget, because I did not know that. That's very interesting. We see the stats about them, not losing in the regular season, but that's very interesting. I did not know that they weren't able to close out games the way they are. But in this league, everything comes down to the wire, and it's a major part. It's at least 25% of the game, obviously, and it's probably even more important than that. So I think it's very important to lock down the end of the fourth quarter, and I think they have to do better at that. But I don't think it knocks them out of contention to be Super Bowl favorites. So I'm going to say that that's overreaction.
Drew, what are you thinking?
I think it's also a little bit of an overreaction. I didn't know that nugget about them being 0-7 in one-score games, so that was interesting to know. But I think regardless, they're one of those teams that, they can get a strong start. And kind of like Cyril said, if you can lock down that fourth quarter, play that strong defense, and take your time on the offense while also still getting down the field, I feel like they're definitely still in contention.
Brian, how about you?
I definitely think that that's an issue for them because you go back to the Miami game. I saw it they didn't score. The last time the Bills scored in that game was in the second quarter with 3 minutes left or something like that. And you can't be doing that against close teams. You gotta yeah, sure they're a juggernaut against these bad teams, but you gotta be able to play against these tough defenses and finish the games out.
Yeah, and I mean, something that really concerned me watching that game was the Bills' time management, especially on the sidelines. We saw it before halftime, and we saw it at the end of the game, where they just couldn't get a playoff. And granted, the play at the end of the game, it was really tough because I think they had some 7 seconds after the play ended, so then you have to get the ball all the way back. The ref has to spot it. You have to get everybody up to the line ready to snap the ball. It's a tough ask, but the one before halftime was just kind of inexcusable, how you don't get a playoff, how you don't get a field goal out of that possession. And that is something that concerned me a little bit. I think the Bills realistically probably should have won that game, but they didn't, and they lose close games like that. I don't necessarily think that knocks them off from being Super Bowl favorites. However, I will say that when is the last time the team that came into the season, preseason, actually ended up winning the Super Bowl? The team that was the favorite at the start of the season actually ended up winning. It doesn't happen too often, and I think that that's a lot of pressure to be putting on a younger team. I mean, they are starting to get more experience in the playoffs and stuff like that, but it's still a lot of pressure to put on them. And overall, I don't know. I might be a little concerned come playoff time when you get into those closer games. We'll only do a couple more here, and we'll kind of do just some rapid fire. Tom Brady should have stayed retired because the Buccaneers offense just doesn't look great. Brian, we'll start with you on this one.
I don't think so. Chris Godwin's been hurt. Mike Evans was suspended. He's not playing with much right now. They had to sign Cole Beasley. So I think getting those guys back, I think Tom Brady should be fine. I think they're just going through some hiccups right now, but I think they'll figure it out.
Cyril?
I agree. I think it's an overreaction. I think with the injuries that they've had, the fact that there's the suspension with Mike Evans, and I mean, let's be real. Who are they going to replace him with? Who's going to be the immediate, replacement to Tom Brady that would, if they really feel like he's not a player that can get them to the end of the year, they can always pull him, and they can always, decide to tank or whatever the case is. But we know they're not going to do that because we know that they're a better team than that. So I think that I think it's a little disrespectful to Tommy Terrific, who I think has shown that a sputter like this isn't going to stop him from just being a good player.
Drew?
Time and time again, Brady's proven that he can come back from being almost 6 feet under when it comes to games. So I think this is an overreaction. I feel like once you get Mike Evans back, once you get your other players back from being injured or being suspended or whatever, I feel like he's going to turn it around real quick.
I think y'all hit the nail on the head with that one. Exactly my take. The Buccaneers are injured right now. This is definitely an overreaction. How many times have we come into a season saying Tom Brady is old? Tom Brady is, at the end of his career. He should have stayed retired.
He's been saying that for the past God knows how many years.
And I mean, now they're just starting to use his, I think, not only his poor start here, but also kind of putting that on the back of his marital problems and stuff going on at home, which I really don't think is fair to him. But at the end of the day, I just think that this team is always, any team with Tom Brady is always going to be a Super Bowl favorite in my eyes. I think people are counting out the Buccaneers a little too early. We'll do one more here, and that is Justin Fields is a bust. Cyril, we'll start with you. What do you think about this one?
It really hurts me to say this, but I'm going to have to say that this is not an overreaction. This is reality. So far, I haven't seen anything from Justin Fields that really shows me And not even when I say I haven't seen anything, I don't even think I've seen flashes of like quote unquote greatness. And he's almost into his into the time where he should be taking off, and I haven't seen anything that says that he will do so. So in my opinion, I think yes, he has the Bears offense was not the offense for him in my opinion, and if he were to go somewhere else then he might be a different player, but as of right now he's a Chicago Bear and I don't see it happening. So
Brian?
Yeah, I think Justin Fields is a bust. I wasn't a huge fan of him coming out of Ohio State. I think obviously Ohio State is a great team and they always got good recruits, and so he always had a great team around him really. And like that just goes with all Ohio State quarterbacks though. But Fields, I don't think he's looked good at all. The Bears can get the run game going, so that should open up the passing, but it hasn't. And he's missed a couple easy reads, and like I'm friends with a lot of Bears fans, and they're starting to lose hope on him too. So,
Andrew, finally coming to you. Do you think he's bust?
Yep. He hasn't done really anything prominent. I mean, yeah, he's won a couple games, but that's down to running too. That's not just passing. I haven't seen anything remarkable from him this year, so I think he's definitely a bust. And if he doesn't turn it around soon, they have to find something else to do because this isn't the offense for him.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with all you guys. I think that this is not an overreaction, and I don't think it's entirely Justin Fields' fault. I think just the fact that, like you guys said, he's in the wrong offense, but to say that if he went to a different offense, he would just immediately switch, flip on a switch and be better is, I think, a little misleading because how many times have we seen it in the NFL where I think, wherever you go kind of can determine the course of your career. If you get put in a wrong situation and you have to stay there for years, like if the Bears hang on to Justin Fields for a couple years, I don't know. It's going to be really hard for teams to even take a chance on him, and he might just become a backup at that point. But, it's just so tough. And I think that hiring Matt Eberflus was really the wrong guy to have at your head coach because you wanted more of an offensive guy. You wanted to build around Justin Fields, and instead you hire a defensive coach. You get him no weapons through the offseason, do very little to even try and protect him on the O-line, and you're just kind of setting him up for failure here. But, yeah, I'll agree with you guys that he just hasn't shown me much to say that he is anything other than a bust. But that was our Week 3 NFL overreactions there, and we'll be back next week for Week 4 overreactions. But now we got to move on to a new topic here. And that is trouble brewing down in the Valley. We had the Suns complete their first practice of the season. And afterwards, the media went and talked to DeAndre Ayton, and he said that he had not spoken to their head coach, Monty Williams, since the Game 7 loss to the Dallas Mavericks. Obviously, we know the Phoenix Suns were the number 1 seed last year, lose to the Mavericks in a very surprising and almost embarrassing Game 7 loss. And obviously, given his rocky offseason, I mean, we know he went through a big contract dispute where he almost signed with the Pacers, and the Suns ended up matching it. My question to you guys is, what do you think about the Suns this year? Do you think that this situation could end up affecting the team? And we'll start with you, Brian.
Yeah, if I'm a Suns fan, I'm definitely concerned right now because you mentioned DeAndre Ayton, but also Jay Crowder wants out too. He's requested a trade. I know the Sixers have been rumored, and also the Cavs. So yeah, I'm definitely worried if I'm a Suns fan. I'm questioning what's going on in the locker room and behind the scenes.
Drew, what do you think about the Suns this year?
Kind of along the same lines. You've got to figure something out quick because you've got players wanting to leave. You've got coaches wanting to leave. If you don't get it figured out soon, you're going to fall behind, and that's not going to be good. And I think if he goes anywhere, it might be Indiana just because of their trade assets.
Cyril, what do you think about this whole DeAndre Ayton situation?
It's unfortunate. It's really is unfortunate. I think as Drew was saying, there's been a lot of talk about him going to Indiana for a while now, and I think that's a place that might end up being a good fit for him because they could use a second star, if you will. And I think he'll have a better chance to be a star there. But in the current times where he's currently in Phoenix, with what came out with Jay Crowder saying what he was saying about the team, that he's not going to be up to play for them this year, they couldn't come to an agreement or whatever the case was. It looks like the Suns are flailing a bit, so I think I think we are seeing the fall of Phoenix a little bit, and I think that they put themselves in a very tight window, a very 2 to 3 year window. When you have a guy like Chris Paul, you have a guy like Devin Booker, blossoming into the superstar that he is for sure, and you have a lot of guys that are not really built on growing together, but they're built on striking at that moment. And you guys had your moment, but they ran into one of the best players in the NBA today with Giannis Antetokounmpo. I'm pretty sure if they play almost any other team that year that's coming out of the East, they're gonna have a pretty good chance to win. So once that window closed up, and I think that's we're kind of seeing the aftermath of that now.
I think you almost word for word said what I was about to say, and just the fact that their window was so short. They had such a short amount of time to really, get a championship out of this team. And not necessarily because of Chris Paul, but I think it was all kind of brewing on DeAndre Ayton. I think that he is such an underrated piece to that puzzle. And you kind of knew that it was a ticking clock. I mean, even last year, they knew that he really, wasn't entirely happy with the contract and with the way the talks were going. And I think this year did absolutely nothing. I think that any chance he had of staying with Phoenix long term is over pretty much, because I believe that he's going to get dealt before the deadline, and I really don't see why Phoenix wouldn't do that, because I think the whole reason of matching his contract, they didn't want to pay him that much.
Right.
They had the opportunity, but the whole reason of matching that was just so you could get something for him eventually in a trade. But yeah, I mean, I think that given how this last season ended to the Mavericks for the Suns, and given this whole situation in the offseason, I just feel like team chemistry is just going to be all kinds of messed up. And, especially with how good the teams are in the West this season,
Just about to say that.
it's going to be tough sledding for them. I could see them still making the playoffs, but I would think it'd be more like 5-6 seed compared to where they were at the top of the league. They were the 1 seed last year, 2 seed the year before that when they went to the finals. But I guess my next question to you guys about this, I know Drew kind of mentioned it already, and I think Cyril did as well, but where do you think Ayton gets dealt to? Do you think it'll be Indiana, or do you think that Phoenix goes somewhere else with him?
I think that we've seen a trend of teams not sending players where they're expected to go. We just heard about Donovan Mitchell not being sent to New York, obviously, because he's in Cleveland. And he thought himself that he was going to be going to New York. Everybody thought he was going to be going to New York, but the Utah Jazz made certain that New York was not going to be able to acquire him. So we've been seeing a lot of situations like that happening, depending on what connections might be going on in the league. So I think Indiana might be the most likely place for him to go, but I could see him going to a team like maybe even a Boston, because I think that if they start clearing out some roster space, if they start moving things around, if they start seeing that Robert Williams is can't stay healthy, small things like that. If Ayton is available, I think that he's going to go to a team that's contending and ready to be that guy where he doesn't have to particularly be a second or third star. He can just be DeAndre Ayton.
Drew, what are your thoughts? Where do you think he's going to go?
I still think he's going to Indiana. The trade assets out of there are really strong coming out of there. I understand, like you mentioned Boston. That wouldn't be another bad pick for them too if they can clear out their roster. But I think the number one pick in my mind would have to be Indiana if for some reason he doesn't get traded.
And Brian, you got any places where he might end up where you think he could be a good fit?
I think he could fit in well with Indiana. Pair him up with Halliburton, and you got two there, and they'll just one away from a big three. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Indiana, I would really be intrigued to see him play with Indiana. I think that would be a cool prospect. But one team I was kind of thinking about that I would like to kind of gauge you guys on is the Atlanta Hawks. What do you think about them possibly trading for him? Because now they got a lot of assets now. They got a good-looking team, obviously always led by Trae Young, but now you got DeJounte Murray on your team. That is a very underrated guard there. John Collins, Bogdanovich, DeAndre Hunter. You would probably deal Clint Capella in there because he's their big man right now. So what do you think about that? How do you think he could fit on with the Hawks?
I think that would be actually a really nice fit, actually. And I think when it comes down to DeAndre Ayton's game and John Collins' game, it's a bit similar, as they're both, more mid-range, face-up players. John Collins is much more athletic, of course, and DeAndre Ayton is a more of a, traditional big man. But I think, with when you have four players, at that, almost all-star level with John Collins, Trae Young, DeJounte Murray, and the player in question that we're talking about. On DeAndre Ayton. If DeAndre Ayton, Devontae Murray, Trae Young, and John Collins are all on the same offense, you're going to have, 20-point scorers at 4 different positions. So I think, if Atlanta is available, or if DeAndre Ayton becomes available, Atlanta is going to be one of the teams that's going to be, at the front of the line.
Hawking towards him, if you will.
It's definitely.
Yeah, I mean, I think that Atlanta would be a really good fit. I like the Boston take that you had. But yeah, to talk about the Knicks, man, they never get any players. I'm sorry if there's any Knicks fans listening out there, but you guys always get screwed over, it seems like. Anytime that
I feel for them.
Me too. I mean, Stephen A. Smith, you can just hear the pain in his voice every time.
I am not having a very good day.
Right, exactly. But I mean, they just never get anybody. They were talking about getting like KD and Kyrie when that was happening. They were talking about getting Zion when that was happening. Granted, they're like listed anytime that there's like a big name player going around the market. They're like, well, next. That's like anybody, they all want to say that they're going to the Knicks, but it never seems to happen. Maybe one of these days they'll land a big free agent or they'll land a big trade. Who knows? Maybe they go out and get DeAndre Ayton at some point, but. Moving on now, we'll talk about the Pro Bowl here. And the NFL has officially ended the Pro Bowl game, and now they're opting for a flag football game instead and other skills-based competitions, which they were kind of already doing a little bit. But what do you guys think? Is this a good move for the league? I know a lot of people were not too fond of the Pro Bowl, but is this really the better option? And we'll start with you, Brian.
Yeah, I never liked the Pro Bowl. I would turn it on just to watch it, but then I'd be like, after like 5 minutes of watching, I'm like, why am I watching this? This is a glorified practice. I don't know what they could do differently. I was thinking maybe like 7-on-7, make it fun, like get the linemen out there running routes too. I think that would be kind of entertaining to watch. I do like what they have been doing with the skills competition though. I like that a lot.
Cyril or Drew here, what do you guys think about the Pro Bowl?
I think it's both good and bad. I mean, obviously it does limit those injuries for like the players who happen to end up in playoffs and in Super Bowls, but like he already said it, it's not that entertaining. Doing flag football would be a little less entertaining in my opinion, especially with flag football and the skills competitions. Like, yeah, you're just running around, holding a ball, not doing a ton of things. But I think the 7-on-7 idea would be really fun. You could get to see some of the linemen making fun plays. I remember in high school there was a time where my high school running back fumbled the ball and one of the linemen picked up and starts charging down the field. And I was working as the videographer at that time, and it was the funniest thing to watch. And like I remember like everyone was giving me a ton of praise for that clip. They're like, that was probably the funniest thing you've ever recorded that year. So I think it's definitely up there. I feel like that would be a ton of fun to watch.
Nothing like a big man running for a TD. How about you, Cyril?
I think it's really funny to say, but I think that the Pro Bowl is one of those things that we say, we get on Twitter, we get on Facebook or wherever you go, to rant about sports, and you say, man, this is so dumb. Why do people still watch this? Why do they put it on? And then when it's gone, it's kind of like, oh, well, what do we do now? Because it's like, now it's going to be replaced with flag football. I don't think anybody really particularly wanted that to happen. So I think, sometimes you got to be careful what you wish for. And I think, maybe there's an in-between between what we have now and what the fans actually want, and maybe moving it to earlier in the season, maybe like a 7-on-7 game that can actually mean something, that can actually, have some type of gain to the teams. It doesn't have to be the superstars. It can be like in the NBA, for example, how the dunk contest is not really the superstars, it's like the young players. So there could be like a candidate, system for each team, and they can, elect representatives to represent them in the bowl.
Represent some of these younger players that
for sure. Yeah.
It's their first year, their second year that haven't had a chance to start in the game and kind of get their name thrown out there as well.
Yeah,
I
for
like
sure.
that.
I think all the other leagues, and we even see the NBA is going to implement the in-season tournament, which was put out by ESPN a couple weeks ago. But with the in-season tournament happening, the changes to the AL and NL home run derby and things like that are being updated. All the other leagues are changing their, changing the guard when it comes to their All-Star games. So I think the NFL is going to have to do the same thing with the Pro Bowl, not making it flag football. I don't think that helps much.
Yeah, I have to agree with you guys. I personally was never one to watch the Pro Bowl even. I didn't even turn it on because I knew what it was going to be. It's going to be guys, not giving like any effort whatsoever. They're just, like you said, kind of a glorified practice out there. And I mean, even last year they were like, doing touch football basically, and it just wasn't really fun to watch. And not only that, I really liked it when the Pro Bowl used to be after the Super Bowl, because then you get the people who were in the Super Bowl, if they wanted to, could come compete, and now obviously they get the week off. I don't think the NFL would ever go back to that where it's championship game and then the week after it's the Super Bowl. I think they like that little gap week there. But what I think you could do is try and make it, a 7-on-7 is a great idea, but try and make it more like the match even. Like those golf events that they get going on. Those don't mean anything, but they got celebrities, trash talking each other and stuff. Give the players like a mic in their helmet. Give them, like a GoPro or something like that. Make it, super interesting, super unique.
NFL players mic'd up.
Right.
That would be awesome. That would be
I
really
would pay
awesome.
money to watch that.
And just let them talk smack to each other, and let the let the viewers, let the fans watch it.
I mean,
and
if we can be on Nickelodeon and have slime like splatter across we can. This technology is out there. We just have to put it to good use for what people actually want to see.
Right.
So I think once the NFL does that, everything will be solved.
Yeah, and I mean, there's really no great option because the Pro Bowl obviously is not going to be. I mean, the NBA All-Star Game is the same thing. Like, people watch it a lot more, obviously, than the Pro Bowl, and same thing with the MLB All-Star Game. But what I liked about the MLB All-Star Game more than any of the other ones was the fact that it meant something at some point. They've taken this away now, but it used to be like home field advantage in the World Series. And I thought that was really interesting. Gives you something to play for, gives the guys, the players an opportunity to not sit out and to, actually feel like this game means something. Otherwise, it's kind of like a preseason game. But yeah, I mean, I don't really know what you could do in the NFL to make it worth something, but I think making it more like a match type scenario where you get those week-long events in there, you get, maybe like a young players, game or, pick up 7-on-7 or something like that.
Right.
But then you give the players that opportunity to talk smack, and I think people are going to flock to it, just like they do the match. All right, we got about 5 minutes now until final thoughts. So we're going to preview the Warhawk football game here. And the Warhawks officially had a bye week this past week, and now they're going to go face WEAC competition in UW La Crosse. That is going to be a tough game. For those who don't know, UW La Crosse was picked to be number 2 in the WEAC this season in football, and the Warhawks were going to be number 1. But what do we think about this game, guys? What are you thinking for the Warhawks, how the season has gone so far? How do you think they're going to fare against La Crosse? Whoever wants to start can jump right in.
I think it's been a good season for the Warhawks so far. They've had a variety of wins. They've had wins where they are up high and can show that they can separate from other teams, and they've had wins where they've had to fight to the end. So I think with this season against La Crosse, it looks like their odds are going to be very good, especially with the team that is right up on their heels in terms of the ranking preseason. So we're going to have a really good game this weekend. That's for sure. That's one thing.
Yeah, I mean, you think about La Crosse, how that game was last year here in UW Whitewater. It was a 13-7 game, I believe. It was
close.
It was really interesting to watch, and it was one of the best games to announce. Granted, now that Mary Hardin Baylor game, I think, took the number 1 spot away. But that was probably one of the better games I had ever been a part. I had the pleasure of announcing. But it's probably going to be another close game. But maybe you think about the Evan Lewandowski factor. He came from UW La Crosse, and now he's our starter. Maybe a little aspect of revenge there. I don't know. Drew or Brian, either of you guys have any thoughts about this game?
I'm glad you mentioned Evan, because I know, as you said, he came from La Crosse, he came here, and now he's our starter. That's pretty significant. I mean, we're starting the season 2-1. They're starting 3-0. Big deal. The only 2 concerns that I have is that La Crosse has only allowed 31 points across all 3 games. We've allowed 51, and one of them we got blown out, and another one was down to the last 2 minutes. In the last minute 30, we got the last touchdown. And Evan only has a 64.7% passing rate.
Right.
It's I think regardless, it is going to be a close game, but it's going to come down to, can Evan get the ball down the field?
Brian, what are your thoughts on the Warhawk football game?
Yeah, this they're number 10, I believe. So this is the third top 10 team they've played already this season. Their schedule's been tough, and I think they've stepped up to the occasion. I think this is a good team. This is a good defense. I think the offense needs to get it going to start it a little earlier. They've been a little slow to start games, but yeah, I think this will be a great game to watch, and everyone should make the trip if they can.
Yeah, I mean, it's a trek up there. I believe it's a Oktoberfest up there this weekend, too. So if you're into that sort of thing and you're 21, it should be a great time going up there if you're a University of Wisconsin Whitewater student, or if you're a lacrosse student, too. I think just overall it's going to be a great game. Like
Even
you
if
said,
you're a surrounding fan, if you're Madison, go to the game. Milwaukee, go have some fun.
if you're a football fan,
It's
Yeah,
football.
the atmosphere is great. Yes, it's football. It's college football Saturdays is going to be dot. So it's going to be a really great atmosphere for sure.
Yeah, but I mean, just to touch on Brian's point real quick, UW Whitewater, they have faced now, this is going to be their third top 10 opponent.
Yeah.
And, given how tough that schedule is compared to last year, even last year was tough, but this year is just off the walls tough. But now you have that experience. You went to St. John's on the road, kind of got knocked around a little, but then you go and you face Mary Hardin Baylor at home. You knock off the number one team. You're riding sky high. I don't know if the bye week will affect them at all, but I really am interested to see how Whitewater's going to handle this game. Because if they are going to be this, top 5 team again this year, they're going to have to win, I think, the rest of their games. But this is the first, 4 games. 3 out of the first 4 games were going to be the big tests. They failed on the first one, great on the second one. Here's the last kind of big test in the regular season. Granted, we got some other good teams in the WIAC. We have, great teams. I mean, Oshkosh is ranked 2, and that'll be a very good home game when they come on the 14th, that Friday night.
I've got a text from my brother saying, I know you're sitting here talking about Whitewater, but row golds.
Yeah.
I'm gonna start arguing with them more.
Yeah, you gotta. I mean, you gotta show them. Maybe you'll have some firepower to talk smack after that Friday night game, but we'll see. We'll see what that happens there. But you got good teams in the WIAC. But I mean, this was the tough test early in the season, and if you can get 2-1 against 3 top 10 teams, that looks real good at the end of the year.
For sure.
But anyways, it's now time to head into our final thoughts. Thought it was a great show overall, and very excited to hear Thursday's show for the NFL picks. It's going to be exciting. And we'll be back next week on Wednesday for Week 4 overreactions and plenty of other news topics going on. But final thoughts, we'll start with you, Drew. Any final thoughts today?
Really excited for this weekend. We got a lot of good sports coming up this weekend. Hopefully we get some more news about, some of the hurricane stuff going on. Hopefully find out what these games are going to do, whether they're going to move them elsewhere, move the time up or back or whatever. But I think regardless of what happened, it's going to be a good week for sports, and I'm excited.
Definitely, Cyril.
Today was, or actually, I believe it was yesterday, was media day for the NBA. So it was cool to see, all the NBA guys, their new threads all over on Instagram and, on ESPN and stuff. So I think it was, I'm really excited for the NBA season that's coming up. But I'm, of course, got to shout out my Vikings. We bounced back last week. Big W against the
Close
Lions.
game. Yeah.
I know it's the Lions, but the Lions are good this year. Lions are top 3 in points this year. So I'll definitely take the big W that we had. So big week of football coming up, and NBA season around the corner. So
Yeah, that was actually one of the points I didn't get to hit in our overreactions was the Lions could sneak into the playoffs. They look dang good this year. They look really good, especially that offense. Dan Campbell, I'm telling you, he's quite the coach, and I think he's got all those guys super riled up, ready to go.
game management, to clock management. What's going on with the coaches this year in clock management? It's been really like an epidemic.
It seems like the last couple years. I mean, we even saw it last year with that Chargers game when Joe Staley just could not get it right, and he cost his team a playoff spot. But Brian, any final thoughts for us on this Wednesday?
Yeah, I got something to say to the Brewers fans. We gotta get out.
boy.
We gotta get out to the ballpark when we're playing the Cardinals and Cubs. I'm sick of seeing the Cardinals, all the red there when they're playing the Brewers, and all the light blue with the Cubs. I'm sick of seeing
Dude,
it.
I'm going when I can. Leave me alone. I'm going when I can.
Number one pet peeve, though, is when they call it Wrigley North.
I
I
hate
100%
that.
agree
I
with
hate
you.
that.
I'm ready to throw hands when I hear that.
Oh my!
It's immediate fight or flight.
And now we don't have the defense that we're in the playoffs, and they're
Yeah.
not. Granted, we're still a lot better than the Cubs the past couple of years. So Cubs fans, I know you have your 2016 World Series, but we've been the better team. We've been the better team for quite some time now. So Yeah, my final thoughts. I thought it was a great show, a great first one on UWW TV for me hosting, so it's very exciting. And I'm just super excited to, see what's going on this weekend like everybody else. The Packers game against the Patriots, I really wish I could see Mac Jones in that one. Thought that would have made such a better game. Obviously, he had the really bad ankle injury, so it's unfortunate, but hopefully should be a little easier for the Packers now. Brian Hoyer's nothing to scoff at, though, so who knows? But yeah, I'll be watching the Brewers as well. And obviously, they saw the Bucks Media Day. That was really exciting. And I'll be following Warhawk football this Saturday as well. A lot of great stuff coming up overall. But yeah, it has been a fantastic show. Quickly, before we leave, give me your top game that you're looking forward to in the NFL this week. Cyril, we'll start with you.
Game that I am looking for.
And you can be biased here. It's okay to pick the Vikings.
Yep, you got me. Vikings and the New Orleans Saints in London is going to be the game I'm going to be watching this week. 8:30 a.m. I will be there. Not in London. I'll be watching.
I was about to say, you're going to London and you're leaving me here? What the heck?
Forgot that game is on at 8:30. Gonna have to get up real early. All right, real quickly, Drew.
I'm going to have to go with them on this one.
And
the London games are just always so fun, too.
such a great atmosphere.
You guys want to meet and get breakfast?
Brian, any games you're looking forward to?
Yeah, I'm biased. I'm gonna have to go with the Eagles, Jags. The Jags are Doug Peterson returning, coming back to town. I hope he gets a standing ovation. He deserves it. I don't think his end of the year at the Eagles was his fault. I think that was all Wentz. Looking back on it now, I used to be a Wentz supporter, but yeah, I'm excited for Doug Peterson to come back.
That is going to be a great game. Me personally, a little biased, but I'll pick the Green Bay Packers here. But thank you, everybody, so much for joining us today. We'll see you tomorrow at 5 o'clock, and we will see you next Wednesday. Have a good night, everybody.